So, yeah, I'm going to talk about the ideas that I first come across in the Right Use of Will books by a woman called Ceanne deRohan. And this is my own storytelling of those stories. However, she tells those stories so well, and I'd actually quite like to promote her books, so I'll put a link with it. But I also find that it's the deepest stuff that I've ever come across and is parallel to my own fairy tale stuff, and it's the only thing I've ever come across that is so parallel to my own fairy tale memories. Kind of thing. There are a few people I've come across that have similar ancient memories. And what's interesting in her work as well is that it's she explains in the first few paragraphs of the series of books, she found herself with the experience of finding that she had a voice speaking to her who self-declared to be God. And she found that very fucking difficult to comprehend or accept about herself, that anyone can speak to God or that God would choose to speak to anyone, because that idea is very taboo down here in the earth, where we have religions that claim to speak for God and mostly make the claim that they're the only ones who can speak for God. And the reason I'm talking about these things is because, I've got no time for religions or the stories that they peddle. None of them ever seemed right to me. And the fairy tale and the vast amount of ideas that I've got going on in my own mind far undercut any of those religious stories. So I guess what I'm saying here is really, I know that what I'm saying here is more of a mix of my own ideas, and yet I'm going to put them across with very definitely the ideas of Ceanne deRohan, who found herself being asked by God, Spirit, to tell the story of how things have gotten so complicated on Earth from his point of view. And he defines that God is God light, God loving light, light that is actually loving. And inherent in there is that there can be many aspects of light that are not loving, that are coming from an angle rather than encompassing the whole. And in these ideas, this story puts across that there was a time when time began where God first became conscious of his own existence. And this is before creation happened. And what I'm going to do here is very much paraphrasing and is just kind of an introduction of storytelling. And I'm clearly advising people should at least get book 1 of this series of books called Right Use of Will, if you're interested in the kind of things I'm describing here, to hear it from the horse's mouth or to read it in its intended form. The important thing about this intended form of these books is these books are very triggering. These books are describing things that I certainly haven't come across anywhere else out there in the world in this way. What these stories are talking about that's so triggering is that they are saying that we humans in our manifest earth realm, we have will that is denied. So that's to say that there are ways in which the light of our consciousness does not accept feelings. So we don't really accept hatred. We don't really accept a whole plethora of so-called negative feelings. And we prefer positive feelings. So largely everyone is absolutely got some kind of a blockages towards some sort of a feelings, which we would call some sort of a karma, where we have some kind of a path that we're on, and some sort of a life that we're living, with things we need to overcome and with challenges that come to us, and where we seem to be punished in all kinds of ways. And just that we have things like the legal system, the monetary system, nationalisms, racisms, class wars, neighbour wars, family wars. We have issues with our mums and dads. Our children have issues with us. We have issues with our children. We have issues with ourselves about our parenting. We have things like guilt. Guilt over things we should have done. Guilt over things we shouldn't have done. The idea here is in the feeling level, these feelings are afraid to move, because if they move, they get attacked. If they move and show themselves, they're likely to get focused upon. So most people are unconsciously denying an awful lot of our feelings, denying our beliefs, pretending to fit in, pretending to go along with what's going on, pretending so that we can fit in with the crowd, pretending so that we don't get singled out. Even in my case, I'm afraid to be singled out for all my good aspects, for shining too bright, for being too poetic, for any of the... I take it all on, I go too far too long, too strong to belong, too old to be told, too near to be dear, no confusion in me, dislike so clear these humans these days, what on earth do they think they are doing? A journey through the dream time. She asleep as I wake, the dark side manifest, our deepest fear is standing side by side at heaven's gate. I am you, you are me, as we came together, we two became three. The seed has been sown, the future now known, Adam and his apple now hanging from the tree. Soon the apple drops into the arms of she. She'll eat of the apple and swallow it whole. Her magic has killed him, just in time as foretold. She has left him, dangling from the branches. As the birds pick his eyes out and feed on his brain, the hanged man, fool and clown, he's lost his light, his candle and crown. He's lost his paper, his sceptre and swords. He's lost his marbles, his memories and worlds. Nowhere his spirit is flying and free, all bodily torment let go in the tree. Now here, everywhere, all where is once, again and again, he remembers creating and how it all began. He remembers Creatrix, and she ringing her bell. The dream time remembered, remember her plan, a planet called Earth and a being called man. Who can heal this rift? Who can grant this gift? Whoever it is, let the job be done swift. For all souls lost in torment, which may well be enjoyment, may hesitate but one moment until Beltane comes cow-pat. When then in one instant, in one moment insistent, the lost shall be found on one sacred ground, and those who are guilty and with riches are filthy, may God's love spare them pain. Remember her plan, don't break the rules of this game. His spirit returns refreshed and reborn, he comes to her river, sits under her thorn. She is sleeping and dreaming such beauty he is recalling. His heart he gives all one last time, remembering his fall from grace in his human race. The secrets, the pacts, the tragic in fact, the destruction of planets and galaxies and stars, all over the struggles of one madman Mars. Oh, thank God and the goddess, thank the sun and the moon, thanks man for a square box, for imagining a room to come up with an ending to end this long song. To imagine this ending before too long. I remembered my mission, I remembered my plan, I leaned down and kissed her so deep and so long. Her breath became fluid, overflowing and free, she bubbled up with mirth, opened her eyes and looked at me. Says I, my darling princess and my bride, I feared I had to die. I lost you, my lovely, I lost you, my queen, yet you always came to visit me, to love me in our dreams. Where were you, my darling, and where was I? Lost in some daydream of separation, some nightmare of regret. Why did I choose to lose you? What secrets to forget? "Arra well," says she, "and now I'm awake I can tell you. I was with you always, even though you died, and always when you looked for me I hid beneath your eyes, behind your stare. My memory is in your hair. I've waited too, remember, willing you to dare to reach inside and love me, to recognize my truth, not criticize my reflection, or crucify my youth. So many times I missed you as you missed I, and you're too busy wandering around, lost in progress while I cried. And that sequence of a fairy tale poetry is from a few years before I read these Right Use of Will books, and it's an example of how there are memories in me of realms far outside the modern day human that refer to much the same things. I don't really think anybody much gets what that poem might be about, because you'd have to be inside of my own 25-year-ago past. But that poem really is about going crazy outside of the personality realm, to escape the personality realm, to be conscious in the dream times, to be conscious in the subconscious, to be both left and right brain, to be that joining in between the two. In the Right Use of Will books, we're talking a little bit about God the Father, being conscious light, has a mother, which again is something that I have going on in my mind that long predates these books. The Mother of God. In these books she's called the mother of everything. In my stuff she's called Creatrix. The idea of there being that in the darkness before light, there was a consciousness that was not conscious. The mother had some tiny scrap of memory of being yearning for life, and yet being stuck in what I might call a quagmire. There was no creation, there was no beings, there was no one else, there was only aloneness before oneness. A zeroness, if you like. A whole without the W. W being the 23rd letter of the alphabet, 2 being the symbol for feminine child, 3 being the symbol for masculine child, 5 being the dynamic of these two working together. So when light was born out of darkness, it was born out of the yearning of the mother for consciousness, so that the mother might have some sort of a mirror in which to see herself in order to drag herself up out of the nothingness and become a somethingness which becomes all of creation. So light is the externalization of darkness. These concepts are huge, gigantic. In the story anyway, when God is explaining this story through the writing of this woman, to cut a long story short, he roughly says, or I'm roughly translating what he says as, at some stage, after all of creation, after all of eternity, relatively recently in human terms, in the last 100 years, say, God's Spirit finally recognized that it is his own shadow that's created what's called evil in this world. Now again, this concept for me is long understood, and so when I'm reading this book, I'm recognizing, hang on a minute, I've got that recognition in my own mind for long forever. The idea that consciousness was not aware of unconsciousness. The idea that when consciousness woke up, found himself to exist, when he looked around, there was nothing else. The only else there was nothingness. Anywhere that light looked, it saw light. You see what I mean? Whenever he looked away, perhaps there was darkness in the background that he wasn't looking at. But if he would try and turn around and see that darkness, he wouldn't be able to see it because his light is shining. The torch can't see the darkness because anywhere the torch is shining, it sees its light. Consciousness can't see unconsciousness because anywhere it looks, it sees its consciousness. Kind of thing. And so, Spirit Light is saying in these books, and eventually he's flying around in the nothingness, and everywhere he moves, everything moves with him. There is no thing yet. But his perception moves with him. At some stage he smacked into something hard, And when he smacked into it, a load of his energy went out of him. And he was like, what the hell was that? And so he tried to get away from the thing. And after a while, I was like, well, what was that thing? There was something else here. I need to find out what that something else is. And eventually he smacks into the hard thing again. And again he loses a load of light and he feels himself being angry. And then he's like, what is this anger stuff? And then he's actually not trying to avoid hitting this thing. He's actually actively looking for this thing to try and hit it again and again and again. And this hard thing that it hit into, that sucked its light out of it and left him feeling emotional reactions, is the unconscious mother of everything, the will, the feminine feeling which yearned for light to come into being. Therefore, the idea there is that consciousness's first interaction with anything else was with unconscious will, feelings, which were stuck, which were hard, which were unmoving. And it hurt. And so, after a while, he realized, right, well, actually, I'm becoming stronger by hitting this thing that hurts. And so he hunted it down more and more, and he was just bashing the hell out of it. Yes, to some degree, he was losing energy, but then he was regaining energy, and then he was losing energy, but he was regaining energy. It's like using muscles to become stronger. It's like working stuff out. Anyway, in the narrative, again, in my retelling of this, at some stage in the books, light that is dictating these writings to this woman, Ceanne deRohan, says, now I'm going to let the mother speak of her experiences. And she says, yeah, I didn't actually really remember any of this stuff. This was all buried in my unconsciousness. I yearned for light to come into being, and when light did come into being, he smacked me, and he smacked me really hard, and then he came and he smacked me again and again and again, and I just got battered. I got what tiny bit of consciousness I was getting by the existence of light was getting hammered by light and driving me unconscious. So she'd go unconscious and then recover and become slightly conscious, and then get bashed and become unconscious again. In my experience, I experienced as being blackouts from extreme alcohol abuse at various times of drinking spirits of all things in order to try and work out emotions. So here's an example of how triggering the information in these books are, because they are bringing into awareness things which we are completely unconscious of, things that were going on in creation before we were created, before we individualized soul beings came to be created. It's like our bodily children, my 3 children, are very interested to find out what was going on in their parents' lives before those children were ever conceived and born, before they became the greatest concern of our lives, that we take care of our children. So the birth of our creation has in its very beginning an immense amount of pain and suffering and forgetfulness and unconsciousness and conscious not understanding what the hell is going on. Now contrast that with what we think of God as light, that God is omniscient, God is all-knowing, God is everything, that anything that's wrong in this universe is because we fucked up creation, not because God made it wrong in the first place or that God didn't know what he was doing. Not that God has a mother, and that the mother also did not know what she was doing. It's all rather triggering, no? It's like finding out, oh, my parents weren't completely in love when they met. Actually, I'm almost like an accidental birth. And then another birth and another birth and another birth, and I'm just one of the siblings, kind of thing. It's a very different version of family life than we might want to hear compared to what we hear life should be like. That our parents should be loving, that they should have chosen to have us, that they should have been ready to have us, that they should have everything prepared for us. So the idea anyway in these books go further, that at some stage the unconscious and the conscious get to have some sort of a relationship with each other where there's both a desire for this interaction to have again, but also fear, terror, anger, rage, hope and hopelessness, all of these kind of things. Loads of emotions, basically. Emotions which were not understood. Light did not understand emotions. Emotions did not understand what to make of the reflection that light was giving. So again, back to stuff that I'd written, and the first pages of my fairy tale book. Like, I didn't come across these books until 2005. Whereas my publication of The Return of the Fairies is a finished product in 2001 and has remained the same book since 2001. The first poem in the book is before the beginning and all that came after. A bit to begin with, a part before the whole, in the midst I call multi-dimensions, the story of one soul. In the time before time was created, creatrix loved to play, to breathe life into light and shine always. Time was created this way. All lights in this light came from one light. Before that the darkness reigned. The first light was born out of darkness, and that was when everything changed. Unseen became seen in a bright white stream, delight of one, born out of naught. The shock of his birth brought joy and brought mirth in the heart of the mother of all. She laughed deep inside as she beheld her love child, and her whole being smiled with elation. The fun has begun. My first child, my son, father of all my creation. The first light was flying in the midst of naught when suddenly began his very first thought. Who am I? Flying in the midst of all, he felt he could hear an answering call. You are the firstborn, the child of the night. You are the first love. I call you Delight. And the second poem is Delight in Darkness. In the beginning there was light. Before that there was only darkness. From out of the darkness was born the light, and the light was made out of darkness. And what I'm illustrating there is that in the beginning is duality, night and day. I'm describing here as having memories equivalent to this woman Ceanne deRohan's writings from God's Spirit's memories of light being born out of darkness, and that being that everything the world seems to believe under religions is that light was the first thing, but it discounts that there was a thing before the first thing, that the first thing is actually the second thing. That being is before doing, is a way of saying it. That the inner realm of the unconscious is before the outer realm becomes manifest as light. In these books, it goes on that relationship between light and darkness, between conscious and unconscious, between thought and feeling, eventually gets to a stage where they're interacting with each other and there's communication going on, and love becomes apparent, that there is a thing called love, not just emotional reaction. And these two begin to make love. This is long before there's ever bodies. This isn't what we humans would call sex. But literally it is procreation. Anyway, these two begin to share love between their polarities, and out jumps a third being. And this being is very loving. It's a child of love. And in the books, this child of love is called Heart. And I would go on to say that this heart is the parental part of what we go on to call Christ or Krishna or any of these light child beings in manifestation. And they found that this third being was childlike compared to them, had an innocence compared to them, was placid relative to their already volatile natures. And at some stage the three of them develop a relationship that is purely loving, and in their love-making sharing time, again before there's ever bodies, out jumps another being. So there's a fourth element in creation. And in the books, this fourth element is called the Father of Manifestation. Interesting title. And in that sense, where the mother is like will, feeling, the father is like thought, mind, spirit, light. The third being is heart, the love between the polarities, a stabilizing influence, if you will. But this fourth being is like the grounding, is like the embodiment of, is like a more earthy, although this is so far before earth, you see. But again, stuff that's not really in the books, but are parallel in my own realms, is at some stage I realized a long, long time ago that we have Mother Earth and we have Father Sky. But why don't we have Father Earth and Mother Sky? And in the religious stories, why is the mother not in heaven? Why is the mother down here on earth? Why is the father not down here on earth? You see? And most people are not ever questioning these kind of things. And in some ways I've learned to not speak about these things so much because I have found this stuff is so triggering for people that it can actually drive people crazy to hear a lot of these ideas. Hopefully it's safe enough to be saying these ideas these days to whoever's finding this stuff. Because a lot of processing has been going on in the last 20 years, and we have been woken up to an awful lot of stuff in the last 20 years, and actually the internet and all the information on the internet has changed how we view the world. Has given us access to ideas which we would not necessarily have ever come across before. So, because some souls have integrated this knowledge at this stage, it's in the collective consciousness in a humanly understood way, and now it's more understandable, and here I am doing storytelling and choosing to do this today so that some more people might process this information and it will be more easily available in the collective consciousness, more easily to be remembered from our dreams, more easily to be processed in our unconscious realms, subconscious realms, superconscious realms. So only the last couple of years that I think, we talk about being conscious, but we don't really know what consciousness is. Even science doesn't know what consciousness is. We talk about soul, but we don't really know what soul is. We talk about a fifth dimension, but we don't know what the fifth dimension is. We talk about time as if time is a physical reality, and yet we don't know what time is. But I have long understood that time is like a bubble, and therefore we are inside the bubble of time, but there is an outside the bubble of time. And that time itself is a construct, nigh on close to an illusion. And apart from that, we believe in it, or because we believe in it, is a delusion. We have the conscious mind, we have the subconscious mind, we have the unconscious mind, and we have the superconscious mind. So there are 4 states of mind, or 4 states of consciousness. And there's a parallel there to what these books are describing, that there are 4 parts of God. There's God light, God feeling, God heart, love, and God embodiment. God physicalizing, God manifesting, kind of thing. And I just find that parallel to be there. So in these books, God light and heart and the mother and the father of manifestation, they all speak about how strange it was actually that in the beginning, before anything else in the universe is created, before anything else in creation has been birthed, the first 4 constituent parts of beingness have 1 female from which come 3 males. Not a 2 and a 2. Not like, there's a father part and a mother part, and here's a son part and a daughter part. No. And the father of manifestation, this 4th being, doesn't come out as a child. He comes out as a fully strong being, independent. Not exactly like spirit light, but a light being nonetheless, but with more densification, more what we would now call groundedness kind of thing. And thus it begins to explain how light developed some level of paranoia and jealousy and a whole load of other emotional states relative to the Father of Manifestation, that he was afraid of the Father of Manifestation, whereas he hadn't really been afraid of heart at all. See what I mean? So I'll leave it at that because it becomes too trippy and tricky, and it's not really my place to go further in explaining what's going on in those books. It's better if you actually read the books, because in a way I'm trying to tell this story without triggering heavily, and these books do trigger heavily in terms of waking up the consciousness to question itself about many things which I have questioned about myself. And I will say that because of the way I read these books, it got me into an awful lot of trouble. I got myself into an awful lot of trouble because I did not read these books from start to finish. I read these books randomly here and there. When somebody pointed out these books on a shelf in a bookshop, there were 4 out of the 8 books there. Not the first 4, but a random 4 books. And so I read them out of sequence. And I was not stable when I was writing these books. I was already gone deep down a fairy path into a demonic underworld. And I don't mean that in any sense to mean evil. I mean demonic meaning the substances of what's beneath the surface, in the subconscious, in the past lives, as well as the future lives. So I was already drinking a lot of spirits. I had already taken a lot of DMT, magic mushrooms, acid, Syrian rue, cherry ponca leaves, ayahuasca. No, I hadn't taken ayahuasca at that stage. So I had already well opened up the can of worms and was taking out worms from the can, sticking them on the end of a piece of string, theory, at the end of my rod, and fishing in the oceans of space, seeking for understandings of how does soul come to exist, never mind does soul come into a body, never mind how does body exist, never mind how does the earth itself exist, never mind how do I have memories that go from before birth, how am I having memories of the birth of God, how can I have an objective images in my mind continually going on for years of seeing objectively and experiencing feeling wise what it felt like to be the first light born out of darkness. And I still seek to try and understand these things. Just while I'm here, these were all mullein plants. A friend took the seeds and sprinkled them along here, and it's just amazing to see. There's hundreds of them. And it's a beautiful thing. Beautiful thing we humans can do. I will mention though, the archetype of the Father of Manifestation is, what I am saying, is equivalent to Father Earth. Father Earth being the masculine of the earth itself. The masculine of the material realm. And relative to my fairy tale and why am I having these memories, that's equivalent to Pan, as in pandemic, as in pandemonium, as in pan-deities, as in covering everything, the whole thing, the masculine version of everything in nature. That's what Pan represents. In the Irish Gaelic, Pan is Puka. In the English thing, he's like Pan with his panpipes, with his hooves, with his horns. In the New Agey thing, among the truthers, he would be Baphomet, the ultimate evil one. He's framed as evil by the Christians back in the hundreds of years ago. Framing him as evil is not really... Shadow, come here. Wow, very good dog. You're not chasing that deer. Come back. Come on. I'm going to pause for a second. Yeah, Pan. Shadow, come back. Pan. The animal nature of things, but the carnal instinct of things. The intelligence that is not merely mental intelligence, is not merely spiritual intelligence, is not merely air, but rather is earthy intelligence. The life force, the masculine that grows. We think of Mother Earth, and yet it's emasculating to only think of Mother Earth. Now, I know I'm not the only person to think of these kind of things, for sure. In all time and space and all of history, I'm not the only one to think of these things. And yet I also know that having spoken to tens of thousands of humans about these things, not that many people actually think to the depths of these things that I'm on about. And also the nature of my mind is that my mind roves around all over the place, and perhaps all those earth medicines that I've taken in my youth, perhaps even going all the way back to when I was a child and has asthma and must have been given some sort of a anti-asphyxiation type of things to help me with breathing. But actually, yeah, on some level I must have been getting fed drugs as a child, which would have had effect on my consciousness. And I've had to wonder, is that why I consider that there is a soul, and that the soul has pre-planned many of these things, and that I must have chosen the type of life that I have in this lifetime, that this isn't all just random? To have such a questioning nature of things, and to be seeking for solutions to problems which other people have maybe not even noticed, kind of stuff. So Pan is said to be the father of all fairies. And again, as these series of books go on, and it's only 3 years ago that Tara and I actually went and bought these whole series of books off the lady who wrote them, which cost a lot of money in shipping because she's in New Mexico or somewhere like that. In America. But you can get these books on Amazon and buy them individually. And again, I'm saying, just get the first one. Just read the first few pages, and I will read out the first few pages of it on some video at some stage to give that little taste of the quality of writing in these books and the quality of personage who's doing the speaking. This being who says this being is the original light of consciousness, who is dictating these books through this woman, type thing. And there's a reason why I'm telling all of these things, that it is to do with a lot of the people who might be listening to me are truthers, or at least people who are searching for truth, or cosmic people who are at least seeking cosmicness, or religious people who've maybe gone beyond religion and are seeking stuff, or spiritual people who are looking for some alternative to what religions don't really answer. About the world's problems, about what's going on with the climate, about what's going on with the earth, about how everything is spiraling out of control, let's call it. How everything is spiraling towards a point of what people call the Armageddon, or what people call like just worrying that the whole world's going to collapse, that everyone's going to die, whether it's done to us by some evil entity, and that evil entity is organised as a one world government, and all of those kind of ideas. Well, in a way, all of that is actually dealt with in just 2 or 3 lines, 2 or 3 sentences in the introduction to the very first book. And I will read that out when I get back home. So, Pan. Anyway, at some stage, these first 4 parts of what we would call God, in its totality rather than merely its light aspect, these first 4 parts begin to share energetic love between each other, and this is where creation really begins. This is where the first ancient beings are born, who really are children. This is what we would call souls, relative to the parental 4 parts. And the books then go on to describe the ancient ones, the archangels, the angels, the various different types of angels, all the way through all the rainbow colour beings, and from the Godhead of pure light down into the manifest realm of soul realm, where beings are more earthy and more feeling based than merely light and conscious, where there are beings that are more love based than conscious based, more love-based than material-based, more love-based than feeling-based, kind of thing. So that there are these polarities within the Godhead, and we favour as individuals somewhere amongst all of this. But the point being in these books is it shows that we all experienced, before we were birthed, the confusions that were going on in pre-creation. And when we were birthed in a certain sort of an order on the soul level, into what you could call various factions. And we've already got these judgments about each other and about ourselves, about unworthiness, about betterness, about insecurities. We've already got loads of denials that we've witnessed going on in our parents while we're in the womb, so to speak. And when we're manifest as manifest spirits, we have these as characteristics. So some are polarized towards the mother and some are polarized towards the father, you could say. Some towards what I could call mentalism and what I could call feeling, towards heart, trying to balance between these, and towards the material realm, which just has to hold all of this together, type of thing. So the conflicts which we have going on the earth at this stage have their beginnings that long ago in these stories. And I find that utterly amazing. I've come across nothing ever in any film, any set of books. Perhaps in The Lord of the Rings you've got Iluvatar, and he sings the whole universe into being, and in that brief story there's the idea that one of the spirits that he's created through this music is called Melkor, and Melkor is the mightiest of all the notes, and Melkor builds himself up to almost challenge Iluvatar's creativity, but he can't. But out of that challenge is how the elves and mankind get born in Tolkien's world, which is what all goes on that leads up eventually to becoming the Lord of the Rings trilogies and stuff. So maybe that to some degree alludes to, and my own book alludes to, but the amount of detail that is given in the storytelling of these books, I've come across nothing like it ever. And thus I'm recommending it. On the one hand, as a sort of entertainment thing for people that like that, but not really. It's really serious investigative work for anyone who really is looking for some sort of a truth that's not merely an externalized I'm right and you're wrong idea of truth. And even for people who've read things like The Course in Miracles and all these other spiritual books, even the Upanishads and the religious books of all sorts, they don't give anything of the depth that's in these books. Sorry, but it's true. They're all a reflection, largely from consciousness's point of view, of why consciousness has to try and fix things by fighting against what opposes what's called God's will, but is more accurately what opposes God's light. And there's no recognition in there that God's light has a part to play in how things have gone on a strange loop and have ended up in the scenario where we are these days, where there's a hell of a lot of suffering going on in the world and nobody can really see much of a solution for how any of it resolves. So yeah, I get to the point then of what I really want to explain. In a paragraph in this introduction, this God consciousness being and introducing himself to whoever the reader may be, to say, hey, you don't remember your creation and you don't really know why the world is the way it is, and there's a lot of stuff that you're in denial of, and because you're in denial of it, you're not even aware that you're in denial of it. You're not conscious whatsoever of the main driving forces that are causing your karma to attract experiences to you, which are unsettling and in many ways disastrous, and have built up to the point of view of, the fear of nuclear war, the fear of mass control, or the Nazis rising up again, or the far left, far right, all of these things that our social media is so full of these days. The bit that I'm so impressed with, which also speaks so parallel to how I understand what's going on Earth these days regarding COVID and stuff, is that it's taken a long time for God to realize that he actually kicked the mother out of heaven. It's taken a long time for the mother to be able to trust the father again, because it was light's denied rage that did the violence of kicking her out, based on traumas that happened from their very first interactions, where she had seemed to suck his energy out of him and infuriate him, and the blame that he had towards her that he wasn't conscious of. And when he did sort of become conscious of these feelings, he projected it outside of himself and said, these are not my feelings, other people are doing this, she's doing this, the father of manifestation is doing this, someone is undermining me. And the concept of a Lucifer, the concept of a non-loving light that would seek to take God, spirit, consciousness, place in the Godhead and remove God from his Godhead and take his place. That paranoia that is represented by the idea of a devil in the Christian religions and other religions, kind of thing. So, it has taken until, I think it says in the books, like it's during World War II, when the Nazis are torturing a fragment of the mother's consciousness being, again, torturing her to try and destroy her, roughly speaking. So this is the idea that there's an idea that something in creation wants to completely destroy creation if it can't take God's place. It wants to destroy everything. Yeah, you recognize that archetype in your own lives? Seen that archetype outside of us anywhere? Of the idea, if I can't have it, then I'll destroy it. You ever seen that idea going on? From a wife towards an ex-husband, from a husband towards an ex-wife, for example, ex-girlfriends. Anyway, again, fair play to anyone who listens to my meandering videos. Fair play to anyone who's ever met me who actually enjoys these meandering storytelling scenarios that I can do. In some ways I get very shy about. It's like, oh, God. I almost wish I hadn't bothered to try and tell this story. Anyway, back to it. The idea being that it was very hard for Mother Earth to trust Father Sky, because so many times he claimed to be willing to make peace and just smacked her again. Kind of idea. So narcissism and that kind of narcissist empath applied on its original beginnings. That seeing any of these things played out amongst us humans is just mirroring, trying to resolve what actually happened before there was ever humanity. Kind of thing. But again, the idea being, the mother has so many self-judgments against herself that perhaps it's true that she did somehow undermine spirit mind and she did ruin creation, and that when she was feeling there was something wrong and tried to tell consciousness and everyone else there's something wrong here, and it wasn't listened to, that maybe she was wrong. And karmically she got so much self-blame against herself that she attracted so many experiences of being blamed, and so many of the children also sided with the father against the mother, kind of stuff. So it's been very difficult to regain the mother's trust, and it's been very difficult for the mother to accept that it isn't her fault, and it's been very difficult for the mother to recognize that allowing what's happening to Mother Earth has to cease. She can no longer keep allowing all the children to be destroying her. And that is largely what's going on among the humans. We are destroying each other. Not every one of us is doing it, but collectively, certainly, we are destroying the earth, we are destroying nature, and we are destroying ourselves. Our denied negativities that we put outside of ourselves, and I don't want to be like that, when it's coming around and biting us all in the ass. Kind of thing. So on a soul level, the whole purpose of these books, or the whole purpose of me saying anything about anything I've ever said, So we need to own this about ourselves. Where we have projected outside of ourselves and seen in other people things that we can't see ourselves doing, for good or bad, for right or wrong, for this or that, whether a hero or a villain. The idea of a hero in my army is going to be fighting against the hero of their army, but the hero of their army is the villain, and from their point of view, what I think is their villain is actually their hero, and they think I'm the villain. This multipolarity polycrisis, it's a good word for it. We heard that this year. Actually heard somebody saying that that's a World Economic Forum phrase. But here's where I'm getting to. With COVID, when COVID finally started happening, I was like, wow, what's actually playing out here is choice. My interpretation of the whole thing is that anyone who's not actually following their own intuition and their own feelings is going to go along with what the mind is telling, which is what the government is telling, which is go along with the crowd, virtue signalling, do what the herd is doing, follow the leader kind of stuff. And my comprehension really is that the people who are so afraid to live, the people who are so afraid of dying from this fucking disease are afraid to live. And even though the way it was sold to us all was like, you could be carrying this disease without knowing it, and therefore you could kill somebody's granny just by visiting them, or just by going for a walk, or just by living your normal life. So the new normal was that the old normal is over. The new one world government is that there is no more nationalism. It's now internationalism. It's now globalism. But my comprehension of it was like, hey look, anyone's free to do whatever they want to do, same as it always was. And yet, massively, people are pressuring each other into wear the mask, don't go wandering around, don't let your children play in the playground, let little ticky-tack tape staying danger stay out, stop your children from playing in a playground in their local area, stop them from being in school, all these things that we all know about. And the idea of trying to force your beliefs onto other people's behaviours, or other people's beliefs being forced onto your behaviours. That really brought up a big question for everyone. And it's been talked to death. I don't really have to say too much my opinion about it, except that my opinion of it all is that one is either connected to one's feelings in truth in the earth, with respect to the earth, with respect to Creator, with respect to having soul, with respect to there being a higher intelligence, with respect to people are essentially trapped within the mechanism of time and reincarnation and all that samsara stuff that Buddhism talks about. And that this has needed to reach some point of fruition, or at least sorting out the wheat and chaff idea, the Armageddon idea, the spiritual war at the end of time idea. My comprehension is, this is all acting out. And it's for each individual, not just on a human level, but on a soul level, to actually choose to be peaceful. And I don't mean that in a sort of a wimpy turn the other cheek way, so much as to be peaceful, meaning not to be fucking crucifying oneself all the time with nervous anxiety. To overcome the mental anxiety and existential angst and actually find a centering in oneself that one is like, hey, I don't know how I got born, I don't know how I died. I am actually just the ego part of this thing, and there is more to me than me having to make all the decisions with my ego. And this is what I watched playing out during the COVID and ever since. This is what I was watching playing out since 2004, 2005, whenever I destroyed my own reputation as a writer of a fairy tale and a Celtic Christian reincarnation from pre-human days, with memories of pre-Atlantis, with memories of pre-Lemuria kind of thing. So I chose to kill my ego, you could say. I chose to destroy my own reputation. I chose to drink humongous amounts of spirits, often drinking. Like, I'm not particularly a drinker, so someone who's not a drinker drinking a whole litre of poutine, of course that person's going to black out and act out whatever is going on. Not just my stuff, but as an empath, acting out what's going on in the collective and making myself the centre of unwanted attention and making myself unwanted and making myself be thrown out of whole communities, out of whole towns, out of households. It's all very embarrassing stuff, especially to be waking up the following morning with no memory of what damage you may have done, but enough memory to know that, you've probably done damage to my own reputation and terrified people, type of thing. That is what I would hear back. And so because I was, by 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, because I'd read these books and was aware that triggering things like terror, rage is a necessary thing in order to get these feelings moving in the collective, I sort of gave myself permission to do these things. I wasn't going out doing this stuff every day, but when it would happen, I would at least be able to forgive myself that there was some purpose in that if these kept happening. Now, these weren't happening all the time. It happened a lot in my downfall in Glastonbury 2004 to 2005. It wasn't exactly by choice I was doing these things. I was actually crippled and broken, wounded and etherically bleeding kind of thing. It just is what one could call karma. It certainly wasn't my choice and my fault. And yet there was the one I wasn't denying responsibility that, hey, I was doing these things. I wasn't exactly an alcoholic because I don't drink non-stop. And yet these things kept recurring, and I kept wondering why, and I kept having explanations for why, and I kept trying to heal that stuff and yet finding, that's not fully healed and it's just happened again. Oops. Till it gets to the point where I have to be a complete teetotaler, which is, again, my natural state anyway. And yet at some times something would happen that would trigger me, and it might be so simple as trying to start a protest or a movement or whatever sort of a creative thing and become relatively popular wherever I'm living at some stage, and hey, happen to be in the pub with some people and think this is trustworthy, everything's going well, I'm healed, and somebody offers me a spirit and I think, yeah, sure, Jesus, I can have one short of whiskey or whatever it might be, and then find myself, the next day, the last memory I have is having a sip of a hot whiskey because I had a cold or whatever it was, and then finding, I've lost my bag with my computer and whatever few £100 I had at the time and everything that I was travelling with, these kind of things. So these are the dangers that I've lived through, which caused me to think, wow, how the fuck am I still alive? Because plenty of people quite rightly tried to fucking kill me back in those days, or suppress me, or stop me from being so berserk, stop me from being so terrifying, tried to defend their family like dogs tried to defend their families, kind of thing. And, it's become popular these days for all these truthers and people to be talking about a spiritual war. Really, they're all just being keyboard warriors with their opinions and stuff, with second-hand information that they've gotten from the internet, whereas back in these days, man, I was finding myself in spiritual wars and having people saying to me, Jesus, you've been through the wars again there, you look fucked, man, what's happened to you? And I'd be like, yeah, demons, shadows in the mind, past coming up again, and being crazy, having ideas that are outside of what's called normal, being psychotic, believing in ideas that other people consider to be crazy, and experimenting with trying to resolve stuff that other people don't even realise could be an issue. That's just about an hour, but I will continue with this little chatting because it's getting off my chest, and hey, there are people out there, I'm not the only one who's having these kind of monstrous experiences back in the day. Maybe one of the relatively few people who's managed to come to peace with myself and beginning to raise back into joy what has been the opposite of joy. Being able to forgive soul for creating this realm, to be able to forgive God, the bastard, for having created any of us, kind of stuff. To be able to forgive my own dad for his relationship with my mum, to forgive my dad for having created my body, to forgive my own soul for choosing to make my life and giving me the kind of karma that ended up in the scenarios that I've just talked about in the last 5 or 10 minutes. So I have a very personalised version of what these Right Use of Will books is talking about. Kind of thing. I am what in these books would be described as perhaps a fragment of heart that is will polarised, which is to say I'm more with the feelings than with the mind, even though I have a fairly vast mind, kind of thing. A bit like the Lucifer archetype in terms of being a very bright being who rebelled against maybe the greater light and yet struck off to go down into darkness and feelings and suffer the things which most people would not want to suffer, thinking, oh well, I'm so mighty I can handle it type of thing, and end up so broken that it's taken a long time to fix. And fix isn't really the right word. To balance, to integrate things. I'm integrate things, integrations, integrity, the ability to integrate, to be out of integrity, to not be able to integrate your experiences and push them outside of yourself and project them onto other people, saying you're the cause of all of this kind of stuff. Anyway, yeah, maybe the thing to get off my chest, the thing I'm getting around to for this whole hour is very clearly in these books, in the introduction, in a paragraph, in amongst what he's explaining a lot shorter than I did, although he only explains a little bit of it to begin with. Light is saying that any who will not align in truth with the Mother Earth, with love, essentially, anyone who will not have a personal relationship with a loving consciousness in themselves, with loving feelings in themselves, with loving the physicality of this world. Any who will not align in love on this earth is having to leave this earth. And this is the kind of things I talk about a lot for a long time. And it's not very acceptable stuff to be chatting, because who am I to say? And this is where I'm at and what I'm on about with COVID. My idea about COVID is like, it's a sort of a soul level euthanasia what's going on. An awful lot of people are not enjoying life on this earth. An awful lot of people have no time for healing whatsoever. An awful lot of people have no interest in trying to heal things. An awful lot of people have no wish to make peace. An awful lot of people just want to justify that I've got reasons to hate and I'm going to hold on to hate. Hate is necessary so that I can fight, and these enemies need fighting because they're attacking us, kind of thing. So anywhere you see conflict, both sides are like, hey, we need to have warriors to fight their warriors. We can't back down or they'll just wipe us out, kind of thing. A lack of trust. So truth is the highest form of communication. Trust is the fastest form of communication. It's just ideas of poetry. I've mentioned this one to people quite a bit. But who is left who would ever want to feel all the feelings which nobody in their right mind would ever want to feel? So, neurodiversity, I just realised in the last few years, hey, I should actually self-identify as being neurodiverse. Because I am just these days really beginning to realise about just how many fucking thoughts I have going on all the fucking time. And it is really just in this last 3 or 4 years that I went off and lit a fire and sat with that fire for 4 days. And the intent of that fire was to sit beside my mind, sit beside the mind, to disentangle myself from the mind, to cease identifying myself as my mind, as if these are my thoughts, and to begin to realize that the mind is like a radio transmitter. The mind is going on whether you like it or not. It's like Radio fucking 4 here in Britain. You got Radio 4 and I used to listen to it in the background, but I had a boat. And my intention was I was interested to write, okay, instead of just listening to music all the time, I'm actually going to listen to Radio 4 and try and understand the British mind, try and understand the British aristocracy, the British government, the British mind frame, British arrogance. And so I let this fucking thing play in the background all day long. For a few years it went on. Until I realised, ooh, this is bad for one's health. Shouldn't be listening to this at all. Definitely shouldn't be letting it be playing and then fall asleep while listening to it. So it's drilling into one's subconscious, unconscious. But I did all that. And I realised my mind, is like a radio station. It's just playing and I don't really give a fuck whether you're listening or not. Type of thing. But if you do listen to it, you'll be like, oh, I'm going to do this because my mind says it's the thing to do. I'm going to follow this synchronicity because I seem to be directed to. So, by disidentifying that I have a mind, that I am a mind, that these are my thoughts, by questioning what is identifying, what is identity. It was only back in January that I really took apart the word identity and gone, it's id, entity. And then the id is that Jungian archetype, or Freudian archetype. It's the carnal self. So it's like this deeply seated in hell, beneath the earth, subconscious, unconscious entity of the carnal monster that we are, type of thing, that's identified as an identity. That on some level there is a matrix, on some soul level there is a karma thing, on some level it is astrologically matriculized as to what birth chart anyone gets, type of thing. There is an intelligence running the game of manifestation, and there is what you could call an evil intent to control everything and regulate everything, regularis and all that stuff. So, an idea that any of us who will not align in love at the end of time will not reincarnate on this earth and will not stay living for much longer. And when I saw that kind of COVID stuff, the idea of people dropping dead on the streets, but then going, oh, that's just a lie, that's not actually happening. Then the, what some people call the clot shot, with so many people suddenly dying after having the injections. And they didn't have to, but if they'd followed their intuition, they probably wouldn't have. But how many people are actually kind of suicidal because they're actually sick of their lives, because they are just working their fucking asses off to earn a living, to put their ashes in when they're dead, to be buried with, type of thing, to pay off the mortgage, the death pledge, kind of thing. So in 2020, before the COVID thing had really become big news, like in 1st of January or something, 2020, I woke from this dream, and in this dream there was a male and female old people at the end of my bed. They were like my parents, but maybe not in this lifetime, and or on a soul level. And they merely said, all the endings get to happen. And I understood that it meant that you can't stop anything from happening. What's happening is going to play out. All these big themes that have been building up for centuries and millennia, they are going to play out. You can't stop the trans movement. You can't stop the anti-trans movement. You can't stop depopulation. You can't stop birth explosions. You can't stop anything, really. The only thing we can do is stop recreating more of our own karmic disasters. The only thing we can do is stop acting out stuff that really we could calm down inside oneself. The only thing you can do is stop blaming other people for things that are none of your business anyway, kind of stuff. And so with that little tip off from the dream time, I was able to stay fairly calm through all of this COVID stuff and not be taking sides and not be out marching on the streets and not be a keyboard warrior so much, but actually just continue researching, trying to understand what is the AI, what is a global government, what is the fucking WEF, but try and understand it all from the soul perspective, or from my own perspective, kind of thing. And because of the depth of self-forgiveness I've got to do for my own, what in hindsight I actually think is suicidal tendencies, not that I was trying to kill myself, but anyone who's going to drink a litre of spirits and have people trying to choke the life out of me or whatever, smash fucking broken glasses in my face and stuff like that, I mean, that is kind of suicidal behaviour in essence, even if it's an unconscious suicidal behaviour, or, as I thought of it at the time, an extreme bravery. And I'm not afraid of death no more than I'm not afraid of life. And these days I've become so sensitive. I am aware of my own existential angst. I am aware that I've got massive anxiety going on. I'm aware that I'm afraid of doing things wrong. I'm afraid of upsetting people. I'm actually even afraid of selling my own fairy tales. I'm afraid of speaking the stuff out loud. Kind of thing. Yeah, I'm afraid of everything on some level these days. And I'm aware that I'm just allowing myself to feel afraid in order to absorb what that feeling is and transmute it, kind of thing. Because I'm obviously not all that afraid of speaking, because here I am, laying my heart bare to the internet on the chance that maybe 5 or 10 or 50 or 50,000 people might eventually watch this and go, fuck, actually, a few years ago I might have thought that guy's just fucking crazy. And now I'm thinking, wow, that guy's actually saying stuff that I can relate to. That guy, with his finger in his ear, wandering around in the woods. A lone voice crying in the wilderness. Kind of thing. Yeah. So, the things that are going on with me, what I am afraid of these days, and for many years, is I'm afraid to make my own platform, and I'm afraid to have an actual website, and I'm afraid to have an online community. I'm afraid to become an online avatar. I'm afraid to be a leader among people. I'm afraid to be influencing people. I'm afraid to be an influencer. I'm afraid to be judged. I'm afraid to start something and not be able to finish it. I'm afraid of my own inconsistency. I'm afraid that I keep saying for 20 years now that, hey, I've climbed down off my pedestal and destroyed the basis of it. I'm no longer willing to answer to being a poet or a Christ or a king kind of thing. I am... I want to get back on the wagon that I've fallen off of. I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to help people. I'm going to heal people. I'm going to tell stories. I'm going to be recognized. I'm going to be wealthy. I'm going to have a piece of land. I'm going to have a home for my kids and my wife. I'm going to be happy. I'm going to share. I'm afraid of all these things because I'm afraid of failing. I was telling the kids about this a couple of days ago, but it was such a picturesque time. But when we lived on a boat back at the time when Bea was born 13 years ago in Hackney in London, there was a Princess of Wales pub right by the canal where you could park a car. You park the boat nearby. It was one of those places where you could get stuff from your car to the boat without having to carry it for fucking miles down a canal, towpath. But anyway, there was a sign there, and it was on the edge of the pub to the canal, and it was supposed to say fear of falling, but it was an old sign and some of the paint had chipped away on the letter L, so that it actually said fear of failing. I wish I had a photograph of it that I could show the world, but I have the image emblazoned in my mind ever since I first saw it, and because we were parked up there for months and months and months over the space of a few years, I used to see that sign a lot, and it always made me laugh, kind of thing. Yeah. So, there are other worlds. We are in this little visual range of visual light. And there's the infrared light down to the left-hand side, and there's the ultraviolet light off to the right-hand side. And why is it left and right? Why is it down and up? We're in this little narrow band of frequencies. You're watching a screen. The images on the screen are within a certain band of frequencies. kind of thing. Because we're fixated on this particular brand is how we're able to communicate with each other on this, what's it called, a narrow wavelength kind of thing. Bandwidth, that's what I call it, isn't it? It's a narrow bandwidth of our visual cortex. So in the nature of time, there are all of these parallel times going on. When I was down in Glastonbury a few weeks ago, I was revisiting some of these back roads and some of these pathways through forests that I used to race around when I was writing all the end of the fairy tale stuff. And most of those memories are in blackouts. Most of those memories I wasn't particularly able to remember afterwards, but would write these stanzas of poetry. And anyway, when I was down there a few weeks ago, I tripped along some of these little realms again and opened my mind in the now, 2024, to be able to remember what was going on January, February, March, April, May of 2000. It's 24 and a half years ago. There were memories of mine there that were inaccessible, and I went and accessed them to integrate things which were out of this world. And I had a realization that there is, the fairy realm, the elfin realm, and it wasn't a new revelation to me, but what I was doing back in 2000 to be able to write these poems, to have these experiences, was that I was in other dimensions, and I have other lives in those dimensions, other bodies in those dimensions, and I was uniting those different realms, those different bodies, those different aspects of my personality spread throughout time in this body. So I was bringing information and perspectives and armies from those other dimensions to this dimension, to bring this dimension back into alignment with nature, back into alignment with Pan. I was opening up pandemonium and Pandora's box and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, I will end this transmission here with a poem from back around those times. Accelerating times, my friends, we are returning, rejoining in reunion, one by one till everyone enlightened in the end, as I await, with patience wait, as more friends come to find. The fears we held so dearly somehow got left behind, a puff of smoke, a dragon's joke, to which we've all been blind. Come join I here on sacred ground, in Green Man's Glen and Fairy Mound, come hold these hands in every land, each drop of water, each grain of sand. Flower and leaf and root and stem, trees and birds and beasts and men. Come join I together in a one big clan. Come fill up this chalice, overflowing consciousness. My friends, we are returning. All over this planet we are returning. I cry out for joy, we are returning. With light of rebirth we are returning, with joy on planet Earth now we are returning. The seeds were sown and we are returning. For in these amazing accelerating times, we angels we have landed, and our inheritance is ours to claim. And these vibrations of love we carry bring providence and fame. And as these days are passing, we enter more and more, and as old age is now past true, we have opened all the doors. Now history is ended, and of time he has no more. Now yesterday is fading fast in tomorrow's potential store awaiting us. The time for talking's over, this story is done and told. Now all we have the gift of healing, healing for arseholes. Now all there's left is the gift of healing, healing for one whole soul. Amen. The aftermath to sum it all up. Jesus was a white boy. His granny came from Ireland. I know this because my friend, the rootless fish, she told me so. She said that the white race were the first upon this earth. Upon this earth, she was the first. He was the first, she said. Says I to her in answer, were they indeed the tribe of Lucifer? Bright white light which did descend from brightest star above with blessed love, and came down here to the Garden of Eden, to plant the seeds of white light, to split in rainbow fragments bright, 7 colours race through course of faith, and deeper down in colours grown, and deeper colours bird tribes flown, and deeper still the lizards lurk, and deeper still the heart of earth, and deepest in the hearts of all, bright white angels caused the fall. The fall from grace to human race, the fall from heaven down to earth, the fall of bright ones in the sky, where down to earth we seem to die. While all the time is just a trick, a game of one whose name is Patrick, whose mother was the only one, creatrix, mother of the sun. Do you see the devil? Do you see the devil is just? Do you see the devil is just the machine by which the lives of souls who choose not to live by the way get recycled through the wheel of karma until the day of doom shall come, apocalyptic, enlightenment. Indeed, Jesus was a white boy, a wide boy. Sure, why not? That's the end of the fairy tale. So it begins with light born out of darkness, and it ends with the rainbow coming out of white light. So it's not a racism thing that I'm on about there, that Jesus is white, although there is a pun on that whole Christian religion, making out as if Jesus could be white, as if Jesus wasn't a French word that says I am, as if it's not just a story. Not that there isn't truth in a story, there is truth in a story, but the idea more so is, like the cover of the Pink Floyd album, white light shines into a prism and creates the rainbow, kind of thing. White light to split in rainbow fragments bright, 7 colours race through course of faith, and deeper down in colours grown, and deeper colours bird tribes flown, and deeper still the lizards lurk, and deeper still the heart of earth, and deepest in the hearts of all, bright white angels caused the fall. The fall from grace to human race, the fall from heaven down to earth, the fall of bright ones in the sky, where down to earth we seem to die. While all the time is just a trick, a game of one whose name is Patrick, whose mother was the only one, creatrix, mother of the sun. Do you see? The devil is just a machine by which the lives of souls get reincarnated again and 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 again until we eventually work this whole thing out, kind of thing. Now, I find it very difficult to join in on the kind of social media stuff where people is all blaming everyone else for everything that's gone wrong, and the left is blaming the right and the right's blaming the left, and fucking blah. It's just such nonsense to my point of view. But I've been so far outside of mind. I've been so far into crazy dream time. I find it hard to understand how people don't see that duality itself is an impossible mental program. I find it hard for people to not comprehend that time is a bubble that you go inside of, and the bubble bursts and you're back outside it again, and that's what people call physical death. I find it hard to understand how people don't realise that physical death is no different to falling asleep at night, and rebirth is no different to waking up in the morning. I find it hard to comprehend how people don't question their own beliefs. More so, I find it hard to believe how a Muslim can hate a Christian, can hate a Jew. I find it hard to fucking read social media. And I find it hard not to read social media, because it's like, wow, really? Is this what's going on inside in people's minds? Are people really not questioning any of this stuff? Are people really so full of hatred and blame and all of these so-called negative emotions that people distance themselves from? But there you go. Apparently, that's the fact. What I am holding back from is being able to say, look, nobody's actually to blame. We all need to learn how to forgive love. To forgive love. 24, give love, kind of thing. But from experience, most people don't want to hear some hippie cunt saying, look, stop hating everybody and start loving. It's too easy to say these words and not easy enough to live them. It's too easy to say you should all be living love, but I'm aware that in my relationship with Tara, with my kids, with my parents, with my siblings, with the world, in my youth, even only a few years ago, there was one morning for the first time ever that I actually drank spirits first thing in the morning. I'd never done it before. At the age of 46 or 7, I'd been up all night, and I saw a post from a friend, an ex-friend you could almost say, from years ago, and he was blatantly suffering and he was blatantly drinking, and I rang him up to say, hey, how's it going? And he hit me with a few fucking horrible accusations, things that weren't actually true, around emotional feels, around ex-girlfriends, around his ex-girlfriend, about my relationship with his ex-girlfriend, accusations that I was actually having an affair with his ex-girlfriend and all this stuff. That wasn't actually true. But there was this full bottle of Jägermeister, and early in the morning, at like 6:30 in the morning or whatever, I decided, I'll join him in his drink fest. By 11 o'clock, I was going to go around and visit this friend, and I didn't actually make it there till 3 o'clock. I was actually pissed off my head by the time I went around there. And I ended up being in a blackout and getting arrested and all this stuff. I didn't actually cause any problems, but nonetheless, I re-engaged that pattern that I'd had before. So it is only, 3 years ago was the last time that I got arrested in a blackout. Last time I actually had a blackout. It's not like they happen every day. It's not quite like they happen every year, but it was close enough to at least once a year over this last 20 years. Pretty much. Sometimes far more than once a year. So, who am I to be talking about a planetary peace process when I have been disturbing the peace so often that people have called the police on me for ranting at the top of my voice on the streets in a drunken manner in the middle of the night or day or whatever, or full of rage, acting out stuff, being the one who's willing to feel all the feelings which nobody in their right minds would ever want to feel. So there's poetry, which is speaking of everything does work out in the end. There's also the recognition of, is that what's called working out? Actually, those who can't be in love and uphold love are going to go outside of love where they already are and see what it's like to, how do I put it? I'm putting it like this. Those who cannot find peace in themselves are going to take out their lack of peace on someone outside. Those who are raging within themselves but bypassing it and projecting their shadow onto other people are going to find other people who have an equivalent level of rage. Those who want to harm others are going to find people who want to harm others, and they're going to harm each other. I'm saying those who are not peaceful are going to wipe each other out, or by their own hand. So yeah, everything works out well in the end. A zero-sum whole. It's not my judgment, but I am trying to express that on the level of God light, loving light, on the level of Mother Earth feeling everyone's healing, and even she having to recognise, right, those who are not willing to heal have to go outside of the healing room. They can't stop the healing from happening. Those who will not be responsible for their own disturbances have to be removed from the scenario where they can stop people from being peaceful, kind of stuff. And that's heavy as can be, while also being hopeful. That's judgmental as can be, while also being the most sensitive thing I've ever heard. That's fucking batshit crazy, while also being the only sensible solution that I'm aware of to what's going on in this planet Earth existence, kind of thing. There's another way of looking at it, is like on Earth has been a festival and souls from all over the universe have come to Earth to have a festival. Which means you can do whatever the fuck you want. Which has meant doing wrong things. And the festival is finally ending. And wherever people have come from, they're going back to. People have to leave here and let the Earth recover from the feast evil festival that's been going on here. Kind of thing. And it's not my judgment, I'm just being a messenger who's passing on a message. I'm just describing as an artistic person a vision that I can see. I'm just saying this is something I've been seeing for a couple of decades, and it seems to me that it's true. That's an hour and a half. Listen, that's a lot of stuff for me to say, and if you've listened, that's a lot of stuff to listen to. So do leave a comment, like, share, subscribe, and all that bollocks. But it's not bollocks, it's true. Shadow, get off the road. Say goodbye to my lovely dog, guys. Oh, there's a car. Shadow, it's a car going for. It's not a car, it's a truck. Bye bye.